Good morning, everyone. We're just going to wait for a couple more people to join, so give it a couple of seconds and then we will kick off. I hope everyone's got some coffees and some waters because you're in for a treat this morning. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining the Klipboard Open ECX webinar event. Just to explain, my name is Stuart. For those who haven't met me yet, I am Sales Director for all the customer accounts in the UK and Ireland. So it's really nice to meet you all and thank you very much for joining. Today we are sitting here and I'm down with the Open ECX team up in Manchester to present and finish off this webinar event with you with our gold partners. Open ECX, which we will find out as we move on, offer a best-in-class solution. So there's two people that are going to be walking you through Open ECX today. First is Matthew Jones. Matthew is the founder and an expert on all things to do with e-invoicing and everything else. And we've also delightfully to welcome James Cave of E8 Smith, who's taken the time out of his busy diary today to talk about how Open ECX has given real world value and savings to his business and how it has been transformed. So next time you'll hear from me, it will be the end of all of this wonderful information you're about to receive, and I will pass over to Matthew.
Thanks, Stuart. Many thanks for the introduction. Many thanks for hosting this event, and many thanks to James for taking time out to present. I'm Matthew Jones. I'm the founder of Open ECX. We are a long-standing partner to Klipboard. We're also a long-serving provider to James and his team at E8 Smith. James, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm James Cave. I'm Business Improvement Director at E8 Smith. I've been with the business for 8 years, starting out as a senior BA to implement K8 and other business integrations. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. We haven't got a slide on this, but just in summary, the session is being recorded, so please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, but the recording will be presented to everyone and maybe made available after this presentation. Secondly, we are recording questions, and those questions will be captured and presented at the end of the presentation. And finally, there is a third point. If you just bring up that slide, thank you. We've got a slight technical problem with PowerPoint. Yes, the third point is that myself and James will be doing the majority of the presentation today. Stuart will obviously come in at the end. Thanks for the introduction. So hopefully all of you are muted so that you can hear us clearly. Okay, this is very much about a collaboration story, a partnership story. I think it's most important to hear from E8 Smith. They're going to go through the challenges they faced in the manual world, how they appointed the right partner. We use the phrase trusted partner within ECX. I hope James will concur that we've acted as a trusted partner. I'm going to talk about the implementation process of how we integrated to K8 and ERP1. I think the takeaway there is that it's seamless, it's very easy. Unlike a lot of ERPs, the connectivity is automatic, it's easy, and it pays dividends in the long run. For those that are interested, the UK has announced that it is going to mandate electronic invoicing from 2029. Obviously, that's music to the ears of myself and my colleagues because we believe in automation, we believe in electronic invoicing. But for those that aren't familiar with the mandate, I'm going to talk through at a high level why HMRC and the Department of Trade are pushing for the mandate, where we are currently in the time frame for releasing the mandate, and also what I think are the success building blocks to moving towards the mandate. Finally, it's really important that we answer, between myself and James, the questions that you pose. Please feel free to ask those questions. We do quite a few webinars. People feel embarrassed or reluctant to ask questions. There are no silly questions in this webinar. please get the maximum out of this webinar. It's very important that you talk about the integration, the capabilities of the Klipboard system, how ECX integrates, and ultimately what the business benefits that come from electronic invoice automation. So without further ado, I was hoping that James would now take us on a summary, high-level picture of an overview of E.H. Smith, and then take us through the business case for electronic invoicing. James, would you mind just giving us a high-level view on the business?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, we are still a family-owned business. Traditional builders merchants makes up about 60-70% of our revenues, but we also have a architectural specification division that works with clients across the country, but largely in London, specifying large infrastructure projects as well. We've got 11 trading branches, but about 20 odd sites if you start including those design centres and sales offices. Yeah, as I said, there it says 420 employees, and that 30,000 product lines is probably a little bit on the low side, but thereabouts. That's us as an organisation. As I said, I joined the business 8 years ago to help implement K8, and at that time the business was heavily manual across multiple departments, but particularly within the AP space. And it was sort of coming out of that project that we realised we needed to do something to change.
Yes, so Jim's just on that then. You've been using ECX for a number of years, obviously. Yep. K8 user. I don't want to go through chapter and verse, but I just wondered if you can give a high level view of where you've moved from, where you moved to, what did the old processes look like, what were you anticipating from electronic invoicing, the benefits, and what you actually achieved.
Yeah, so yeah, the old process, coming off the old systems, heavily manual, paper-based, lots of printing and receiving of paper invoices. So we processed nearly 100,000 invoices a year as a company, and all of that was being done manually. I think we had a team of between 8 and 10 people who were purely dedicated to taking those paper invoices and inputting them into systems. Off the back of that, there's also a team of filers with dozens of filing cabinets in a room where copies were being filed. Not sure what system they were using to do that, but there was a team in there going through that as well. So it was, it was also in terms of what the warning signs were for that process was this sort of process was taking place in a large open plan office. It was taking up the center of the office with all of these desks. It was a very visible manual process that looked clunky, and it was an immediate sort of warning coming out. And obviously, yeah, there were delays and errors in supplier payments. Querying and invoice matching was an absolute nightmare. So there were plenty of red flags across that process that meant that as soon as we got the K8 system installed and up and running, and we'd gone through the go live issues to get to a stable platform, that the AP process was one of the first things that we looked at, and that really led into the decision making process as well.
So there wasn't possibly a final point which forced a decision. You could see this in your operation that this wasn't efficient. It was too manual, and you had your new shiny K8 system. So why not automate it and get the maximum out of that as well?
Exactly. So previously they didn't have the capability to do that automation. The implementation of the K8 solution was the enabling technical factor to allow us to look at this. And yeah, something had to change.
Just something I'm interested in. Was this in the internal mechanics and mechanism decision like this? Was this is an IT project, or was this led by finance? Who led the charge on this?
Yeah, so it was a collaboration between finance and IT. We were the big protagonists between us. So the FD at the time had come in from another business where they had some form of EDI, so he was familiar with the technology. He was a big advocate of it. Obviously, I understood the capabilities that we now had in being able to integrate with K8, and between us, we sort of got the rest of the management team on board that, you know, the processes as they stood were, you know, 20, 30 years out of date, frankly, and yeah, we had to modernize.
Listen, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm also interested in how you went through that journey to select a trusted partner. What particular criteria did you use, and how did you come across ECX, and what was the decision making around ECX?
So I think we ended up with 3 vendors, which were Open ECX, Causeway, and True Commerce, in terms of the final decision that we had to make. Now, I think the main thing that tipped it over the edge for Open ECX was the capability and understanding of that K8 integration. The other 2 hadn't experienced it before, whereas Open ECX had, so they had a better understanding of what was involved in integrating. And so from my perspective, that was very appealing from a technical perspective, having been through multiple integrations in the past, being promised the earth to be delivered something that's less than stable or accurate. And then the FD was in charge at the time, was in charge of the commercials, but I believe he got a good deal on the commercials.
I expected, did you? I mean, I think one of the things that we tried to promote when we were talking to you guys was that existing K8 community that we had.
Yeah.
We had quite a number of long-standing customers, and that, as you said, that understanding of how the system worked, how the integration worked. I think it's very important not just to put 2 systems together. It's very important that those two systems work in harness. So
Yeah.
it's nice for you to say that. Was there any areas of the business that particularly needed convincing? Was this IT pushing this, or was this?
Yeah. So you know, it is a very, you know, traditional business, like I said, traditional family-run business with a lot of long-established staff members. So as with any sort of automation project, there were concerns about what the objectives of the project were and what that would mean for people's roles. Now, you know, we do always say when we run projects here that we'll never set an objective of a project to be a reduction in FTE or number of heads in a team. We always try to plan to say this will free you up to do more value-adding tasks elsewhere, even if or giving you opportunity to upskill in a different area. And that's really what we try to promote. So in terms of that pushback and that fear from the business, that's how we sort of try to allay those fears and make sure that we actually do then offer those opportunities. Should that workload be moved into an automation, then we actually have opportunities to move sideways or move departments or do some alternative training to add value to the role elsewhere.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. Obviously, been involved from the business in day one. It's very rare nowadays that people talk about cost reduction. It's all about scaling the business, and actually our sales guys, that's the message they lead with, and that seems to be reciprocated with our prospects and our customers. It's very much around doing more with the existing capability within the business. I've worked obviously on building ECX up, and I believe we've got a number of USPs around supplier onboarding, the business rules engine, et cetera, and the flexibility of the transaction that we provide. But I just wondered if you from your perspective, what set ECX up, and what have you come to see that possibly we don't see as the benefit of Open ECX?
Yeah, no, those are actually very two good points from the sort of the tactical implementation level. The supplier onboarding we found was a pretty smooth process. We approached that by just, common sense. We started with our highest volume suppliers first, made sure they got onboarded, and then we tranched it up after that into blocks at a time. But it was a pretty smooth and straightforward process. the advice during that onboarding, I guess, is just make sure you've got all those edge cases covered when you onboard a supplier, in terms of, you know, what data could possibly come through on an invoice. I think one of the ones that caught us out early doors was timber, because obviously you need the correct certifications for timber, and make sure those are checked before we pay invoices. So we've configured that sort of decision engine to make sure that we've got rules in there to suspend an invoice from processing, should it have a timber product on it, so that someone can manually check that the certifications and the chain of custody are correct before we then pay the supplier. And we've got some other rules in there along other lines that where we want that human in the loop to perform a final check before we release the invoice into the system, and having that capability within the platform in a relatively straightforward way in terms of logging those rules with the support guys and then getting them implemented. It was another sort of differentiator that helped with the implementation, and we were, you know, really happy with, I guess.
And yes, and all those experiences collectively mean that we're constantly honing those processes and implement our implementation processes as well. I think it's really important to get across to anyone who's watching that this isn't necessarily a giant ERP sized project. This is quite a small project. We pride ourselves internally here of having a 6 to 8 week go live. Not every customer can fulfill that because of different issues maybe at their side, but our ambition as a standing start is that we will have you live in 6 to 8 weeks, and for the most part we achieved that. This is not a giant project, and I think that's one of the other things that we needed to get across when integrating your invoices. We had a very simple process for getting you live, 5 key steps. But from a customer's point of view, would you agree that this is not a giant IT project that requires lots of manual effort and lots of people to be involved?
Yeah, and I think just to build on that as well, once from an IT perspective, we'd sort of system tested the integration, you know, made sure that the mappings were all correct and done the setup within K8, which didn't take very long at all with a bit of K8 consultancy. I think it was probably a day in terms of doing the K8 setup, and then it was just the system testing the integration. Once that was done, the rest of the workload very much fell within the business. So it's not an IT project to onboard. The actual AP team themselves do the onboarding. I think we've onboarded about 600 odd suppliers over the 7 or 8 years that we've been running with the system. So yeah, in terms of where your responsibilities are, it's very much a joint deployment with the business teams that are affected in AP and IT supporting in the background.
Yeah, and one of the often overlooked elements to a successful e-invoicing project as well is we set the business up not to make it easy just for the customer, we make it very easy for the sender, the supplier as well. So another point to get across to the audience is we're not asking the suppliers to change their business process or invest in technology or even pay us. The recipient pays for the invoice. Unlike our competitors, we don't charge the sender. But the technology we typically use is a structured PDF attached to an email, which we then take. We put that through our business rules engine or logic and reconstitute it in the file that's required by K8. So from your supply chain's point of view, I think maybe one of the USPs was that there wasn't any frustrations at the supplier end. We're not asking them to.
That was good, because we would have got if you ask suppliers to do anything in terms of their own changing their internal systems, then that would have created too much friction and it wouldn't have really gone anywhere. So the only change from a supplier's perspective is the email address they've got in their system as the billing email, and that's it. Once they change that, the system takes care of the rest.
Yeah, cool. So where we are today versus where we were before, we've got some high-level summaries here, but you mentioned the transaction volumes. We inside ECX talk about straight-through processing and the need for the majority of your transactions to automatically go through to K8 without any manual intervention. I just wondered if you could take us through some of these before and after KPIs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's about right. We are doing about 5,500 at peak times. We could be doing 6,000 invoices a month. 80%, I think, flow straight through to K8, and the 20% that don't, the majority of those are our own business rules, as I mentioned earlier, that we're actually saying, oh, put those into suspense because we want somebody to check them. The error rates that we get are normally errors by the supplier, where they've not put the correct purchase order number on, or it's missing a value, or they've changed the format of their invoice because they've had a rebrand or something like that. So in general, 80% of it goes straight through. So it's fully automated. And then from the K8 side, which is outside of the Open ECX control, we run purchase invoice matching twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. Don't have to hand what our match rates on that are, but again, the vast majority of those auto match for remittance, and then we just have some querying process that we've built out in K8 ourselves to make sure any invoice queries such as pricing mismatch or quantity mismatch are resolved by the right team, and we've got that whole end-to-end process is working really well for us, and it all starts at the front with the automated input of the invoice data from you guys.
Yeah, and again, just to emphasize the point, the two systems working in harness means that your experience of K8, the workflow and approvals in K8 mean that you're truly automating invoices. You're not, this is a seamless integration from supplier through ECX straight into K8.
Yeah. And it's also exceptionally rare that once an invoice hits the K8 side of things, that it sort of fails within K8. When we first started the project, we monitored the import log every day to double check that it was all going through, and I don't think we even bother checking it anymore. It's just it's always seamless, and I don't think we've ever had one that's actually failed on the K8 side of things. So it's as bulletproof as it can be once it gets to K8.
And internally, those team members that we talked about before, people in finance, they're doing other value-added tasks. They're allowing the business to scale. They've been reappointed within the business.
Yeah, 100%. So some moved across to our, as I said, we've got an architectural division which sits at the other end of the office. They do a lot of order processing work because they're big complex projects. There's also a little bit of staff turn in that project, in that team, so it's so busy. So quite a few of them reskilled and went across to that team to help that team expand, and then others, natural attrition, retiring or leaving the business and going elsewhere, and then maybe we didn't feel the need to replace those. So that's a bit of mix of both.
Yeah, and does it surprise you that organisations still have not automated this process?
I can understand the fear because, as I said, having been through integrations before, you get sold the earth a lot of the time and then end up with something that doesn't work or is so error prone that it doesn't get the value out of it that you want. But for us, yeah, this, looking back, it would be a no-brainer to have this implemented and move away from those manual processes.
Many thanks. So we've just heard there from a real life customer of both Klipboard and Open ECX how the two systems work to automate this key process. James, you've done a sterling job taking us through that process and the benefits for E.H. Smith. This section is really more of an information section. Open ECX sits at the heart of electronic invoicing. We're passionate about electronic invoicing. We've built a business focused on electronic invoicing, but behind the scenes, we're working with organisations such as HMRC, Department of Trade, some of the working group bodies to look at the UK mandate. Now, for those that might not be aware, the communication from HMRC wasn't unbelievably brilliant, so you might not be aware of this, but actually from 2029 in April, the government is looking to mandate electronic invoicing between business-to-business relationships, not business-to-business, not business-to-consumer. What that means is, well, we don't know the exact makeup of that design implementation model, but I'll show you a bit more information about what we do know. What they're talking about is that they want businesses to move to structured digital invoicing, and they want to be compliant invoices between businesses to businesses. The consultation is still ongoing. They expect to report to ministers by this year's budget. And what I'm trying to get across today is that whilst 2029 is a couple of years away, we don't want you panicking, but I do think it's important that organisations begin to think about what that means to your organisation. So from a very high level, why is the government doing this? Well, if you look around the world, particularly around Europe and South America, there's been many governments mandating electronic invoicing, and the principal reason for doing so is that they can capture the perceived tax gap. They think that they've calculated that there is a possibility of a 22 billion VAT gap on what they are actually due. Now, if you move to electronic invoicing, that would present the government with an ability to capture that data in more real term. They're also ambitious enough to want to keep pace with Europe. This is becoming quite common across Europe. They want more integration with Europe. They want us to be on a par with our competing trading nations around the world. So these are all the reasons why the government is looking at this. Behind the scenes, they're also aware of things like fraud, cutting the cost of doing business. They want to present businesses with access to working capital. This is linked to part of King Charles's speech at the opening of Parliament the other day, where they're looking at fair payment and prompt payment. Again, an electronic invoice presents the government with a great ability to then enforce prompt payment, and that's one of the key features of King Charles's speech. When we talk to prospects and customers who are thinking about the implications of the mandate, we talk about three items to consider, and we do have more detail about this. We are running our own webinars on this, so please feel free to connect into Open ECX and get more detailed explanation. But actually, even if you're already doing electronic invoicing, you need to consider the implications for not only your own business, but also your supply chain. And that might mean for people who are not doing automated electronic invoicing that you need to consider the capability of your finance system, whether you maybe need to upgrade or change your ERP. You may need to look at your business processes, whether you are capable of doing through a matching, a line level matching, etc., etc. So it's a good time now for you to consider whether it's about time to push the button on that upgrade or that acquisition of a new ERP, because without that being in place, then you can't move to the next step, which is getting yourself ready for the mandate. The other thing that we promote our customers to think about is taking ownership. Now, I use the phrase being the grown-up in the room. You yourself might be fully capable and compliant, but you might need to help your supply chain, because without your suppliers, it will have a massive effect on your own business. So you might have to be take ownership in respect to your supply chain as well. And that might mean you bringing them to the party, you issuing documentation from an organisation such as ECX as to what the mandate means for them, how ready they are, what you're expecting them to do. So that might mean you acting as the parent in that relationship. The other feature that I like to promote is that whilst electronic invoicing compliance is important and compliance is key for obviously the mandate, electronic invoicing isn't just the be all and end all. We encourage our customers to look at their wider purchase to pay processes with their supply chain, or even their order to cash processes with the customers. This might provide you with an ammunition or a starting point to introduce electronic invoicing, but also go to the next step of pushing out electronic purchase orders, receipting goods received notes electronically, or engaging with your own customers to send your invoices electronically and expect to receive electronic purchase orders from your customers. So this for me, whilst very important, actually could be the starting point for many of your own aspirations around purchase to pay and order to cash success. So overall, what I'd like to just get across, and hopefully James and I have done that today, when it comes to AP automation, electronic invoicing, obviously you've heard the success that E-Smith have achieved, but this is a real demonstrable benefit to your business. This is not fool's gold. It can be delivered in a matter of weeks. It's not a sizable IT project that requires your entire operation to shut down as it upgrades the system. In the case of K8 or ERP1, it's seamless in its integration. This is not necessarily two systems working independent of each other. The real benefit, as I always say to the Klipboard team, happens when we deliver an electronic invoice, and then the customer applies the K8 workflow approval to get the maximum benefit from automation. E-Smith is a clear example of the business case, and actually E-Smith is not the only one. We've got quite a number of Klipboard customers on our portfolio. Some are very, very large, some are quite respectfully smaller organizations. So this is not a big company requirement. It's not a big company prize. Quite a lot of smaller organizations are achieving the benefit from electronic invoice automation. With the mandate coming, and 2029 is not too far away, and you don't want to be one of those businesses that are trying to comply in the last months of 2028, well, the mandate gives us another reason why we should consider automation. But actually, just compliance alone is missing the trick. Whilst obviously every business is going to be forced to do this, the reality is that there's a demonstrable business case. It's in your interest. Kill off those manual processes, automation, take out the manual problems that affect you and your supply chain, get to a position where you can pay your suppliers on time. These are all business benefits that affect your margins, affect your organization, and affect your ability to grow. So yes, let's use the mandate possibly as a reason to consider this, but actually let's not forget the core business benefit of electronic invoicing. And I hope through this process, we also talked about why making a decision on the right partner. The project with James and his team has been smooth, not just because of what ECX does, but because the ERP was very capable, but also because James and his team took a leadership position and were interested in the success of the project and making it happen. So that three-way relationship is what is key to successful rollout of electronic invoicing. We always try and act as trusted partners to our customers. And in that respect, we're not only just talking about delivering of an invoice. James made mention to our business rules engine. What we're trying to do at all points is try and eliminate all the schoolboy errors that go in your AP team, all the frustrations that stop an invoice being processed or a supplier being paid. And hopefully throughout this presentation, we've demonstrated that. So I'm going to pass back to Stuart. If you want to host the questions, I'll answer them if that's all right, Stuart.
Right, let's see what we have. So, hello everyone. Right, I have a question. First question is PDF e-billing still in scope, or is the mandate moving to more of an EDI model?
So I think there's a question here, and forgive me if I come across a bit bullish, but I've been doing electronic invoicing for a number of years. There's quite a number of organizations out there that believe that just simply sending a PDF is electronic invoicing. The customer then takes that PDF and types it into their ERP. That's blatantly not electronic invoicing. Where there is still an option to use PDFs is where you use a service provider like ECX to convert that structured PDF into structured data that can then be processed through in a compliant model. So PDFs are very much the lowest common denominator in the sense that everyone can send them. But actually, what's key is that you then need a service provider such as ECX to convert those PDFs into XML or EDI. So to answer that first question, yes, PDFs are very much in scope, and they, by pushing them through a service provider, then allow for more use of an EDI model.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for answering that, Matthew. So, next question. Do you think the HMRC will extend the 2029 deadline on e-invoicing for business to business? Question says, as I think some businesses and industries are going to struggle to make that.
Yeah, and it's a really good question. I can't speak on behalf of HMRC. I know their team are working very hard at the moment. The current timeline that they're working to is they're producing an internal paper that will go up to ministers across the summer. Ministers will then consider that. And then in this year's budget, there'll be an announcement on, I don't think the complete exactness of the model, but I think it will be direction of travel, how the implementation would look like, what the phasing would look like, how it will roll out from 2029. As a construction man with a history in construction, I think the construction industry will be one of the first industries to be looked at. But I think the practicality of this rollout will mean that there might be a phased approach. There's 2.7 million businesses that have got to move to electronic invoicing. 10 million invoices per annum are being processed in that community. So I think pragmatically, it might end up being a phased implementation, but I can't quite tell you that now because we're waiting for HMRC's final paper to be distributed at this year's budget.
Brilliant. Right, James, you've been quiet for a bit too long. I have a question I think might be best for you to answer, if I may. So, well, the question states, what is the highest volume of lines per invoice that you invoice?
It's a good question. I don't know the highest without somehow going to go and check, but I have seen invoices go through with 30, 40, 50 lines on them without an issue. So multi-page invoices haven't caused us a problem.
Just on that point, because I do know where that's coming from. The ECX system doesn't care whether you've got one line or 10,000 lines, and we don't charge per line. Some of the legacy systems did do so. Just to make this interesting, we've got some of our international customers on purchase orders and invoices, processing purchase orders and invoices with thousands and thousands of lines of detail on it. And whilst the system obviously has to check and validate that data, it's no consequence. So please, whoever's asked the question, please do not worry about the number of lines that are being processed because the system blatantly does not care.
So one question comes. So James mentioned suppliers changing PDF format, which causes issues. Is the solution not capable of recognizing the change and adjusting for it without input from humans?
Well, I'll answer it from a today perspective, and maybe Matt can jump in afterwards if there's anything around this. But my understanding is because the data fields move around within the invoice, the system isn't capable of understanding where the data has moved and where it should be mapped back into. Is it a VAT value? Is it a unit value? Is it the total for the line? It will just see a number. You need to tell it what that number means, and that requires a support call to remap that data to make sure it goes into the right place so that you have an accurate import. Now, I don't know in the world of AI whether there's thought about that map, but at the moment it needs a manual remap.
Yeah, just on that point, and again, I'm not being deliberately overselling this. The reality of we have 15,000 active business-to-business connections, what historically we call maps. I think you've got 670 of those, James. Please be assured, they are not changing on a regular basis. Most connections, most PDFs will stay static once it's been put through UAT and go live. In the very, very rare occurrence that, say, one of your suppliers moves from Business Central to Oracle or fundamentally changes their ERP, therefore fundamentally changing their PDF, the worst position will be that that comes through to our system is recognised, and we have a conversation either with James or his team to say, we've identified this mapping change, it's been held in suspense, do you want us to make that change? Yeah. So this is a percentage churn on a huge volume of maps that very, very rarely happens. And actually what happens, as James mentions, is that between the two organisations, we'll flag it, and then there's a request to make the change subtly. And that might mean that some of the data has been moved because the PDF's been reconstituted, but actually this is quite a rare occurrence. In the world where we are now, James, when we first started the business, we were doing probably about 50 maps per month because we were doing it very manually. But our approach to AI is very much over the last few years been that we are employing AI to speed that up, to create efficiencies. So I can't give you the exact quote, but the days of us doing 50 maps per month, I think we've got graduates here doing 50 maps in a few minutes. Because what we're doing is we're employing AI to do that fundamental core mapping, and you used the phrase earlier on, human in the loop, because we're dealing with sensitive data and our customers won't want it any other way. We don't just rely upon AI, we then employ very clever people in the Manchester office then to do that final adjustment, that final check before we push that transaction live. But that process is very straightforward, deals with the rarity of a PDF change, but actually works really, really well because we're not going to try and infect your ERP with problem data. We're trying to eliminate, push that into suspension, deal with that so that you don't have any problems processing the invoice.
So this is one of my favourite questions that I think every project should ask. From James, this is one for you. Is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, probably. I sort of alluded to it earlier, but probably a little bit more effort understanding the edge cases of your data and your transactions. You know, that's what in sort of after go live or going live with a supplier would cause us issues and increase suspense rates. So, you know, understanding the weird and wonderful unit of measures, maybe they're normally an issue that you might get through on an invoice, and making sure, you know, that the supplier will, you know, sometimes the location of data on the line, for example, if it's a special product that's a bespoke order, the formats might slightly change and items switch around. So making sure that those examples of those edge cases are gathered before onboarding the supplier, you know, even if that's just someone having a quick flick through the last couple of months of invoices to say, oh, actually, you know, that purchase order number for that specific site is different to everyone else for whatever reason, and therefore we need to make sure that during the mapping process, that business engine, logic engine that Matt was talking about, can take that into account, that says, you know, oh, if it's this site, expect the purchase order number to be 8 digits long, not 6 digits long, or whatever it might be. So yeah, a bit more focus on the edge cases during onboarding. Don't just take the last invoice the supplier sent you and say, right, okay, that'll do. Just make sure you think through those different scenarios and have an example of each during the mapping process.
Yeah, the starting point, James, actually is we often say to accounts payable team, list out in Excel all the schoolboy errors you see today from your supply chain and the volume of things that are affecting you, and we'll pick them off. Again, I want to stress this is not a complex IT project. This can be done between two enthusiastic teams working together. But examples might be very basically, we'll check that the invoice has got a PO number or the product codes line up. We can go as complex as you want. And what we often find, James, you would be in this category, is that once you understand the capabilities of the ECX business rules engine, you then sort of enjoy trying to maximize the number of rules so that you get the maximum throughput of invoices. And our customers who've been long-standing with us, they build upon these rules to trap errors like, have we received a GRN? Is the product code matching? We call that product a 123, but the supplier calls it a 456. We can really eliminate, by working together, all of these schoolboy errors that your accounts payable team face.
So carrying on with that, how long did the onboarding actually take end to end?
Go on, James.
Well, so like I said, we carved ours up doing the most important ones first. Now, if you're saying onboarding our entire supply chain, that isn't always possible because sometimes people still rely on paper. But we sort of worked to the benchmark that like achieving the Pareto, like 80% of our supplier volume was like objective achieved. I think that probably took us about 6 months overall to get those all onboarded. And like I said, and it's now an ongoing process. So every now and again, we will purchase from a new supplier, or that might take a new supplier on for a different range of products. So that onboarding process, in a way, never stops because you're always occasionally having to bring new suppliers on. But I think to reach that 80% of our supply base took about 6 months overall. But we were up and running with that first tranche of the most important ones in that sort of 8 to 10 week period that Matt indicated for the length of the project.
Yeah. So I'm going to combine, there's 2 questions to go. I'm going to kind of combine these because they're all about the same topic, which is the mandate. So first of all, the first part is, what does the mandate mean for a fully manual business? Second part to this question is, do you think that PEPL will be that direction of travel?
Okay, so as we said before, we need to understand the exact makeup of the mandate and how the government envisages breaking this down. But the brass necks of this, the headline is that every business in the UK, there's 2.7 million VAT registered businesses. The vast majority are in a category where they don't have an ERP or a finance system. Approximately 2 million businesses don't. Fundamentally, every business will move to a position where they have to be compliant on electronic invoicing. So yes, I know it seems a long way off, and it seems that a lot of organisations maybe have to consider the fundamental operation of how they use technology. But yes, even manual businesses today will have to move to electronic invoice automation. And by the way, that's not just inbound, that's also outbound as well. And what a lot of the audience today and a lot of Klipboard customers, because of where you sit in the supply chain, means that you need to consider receipting invoices, but also how you send those out electronically. There's a question around PEPL, and our own marketing team are issuing more information about PEPL. I won't go into the full detail now, but for those that understand what PEPL is around Europe and around Singapore and other countries, PEPL it allows for the transmission of electronic invoicing at scale, at government level scale. I think it's fair to say that the UK government will be looking at what's been achieved in other countries around Europe. PEPL is in use in different countries. It's not necessarily being used to the optimum in different countries at this moment in time. But I think the direction of travel will be the government uses PEPL at some level, and service providers such as ECX, which I'm happy to say we're already a service provider to, we're already an accredited partner of PEPL, will then process the transactions on behalf of sellers and buyers into the PEPL network. So to answer the point, it's not exactly clear yet, but I think the government direction of travel will be that PEPL is in some use, and then it'll be the likes of ECX that fulfill how you get into PEPL and how you get onto PEPL. But that's already been covered by ECX.
So, wow, amazing conversation. Firstly, thank you to everyone for attending. Your amazing questions. It's really good to get a lot of information. James, thank you so much for sharing your great story. One of the key bits that I've got from James's story and leading into what Matthew said is, you know, one of the reasons we partner with Open ECX is that understanding that we as both businesses from a Klipboard and an Open ECX point of view have that partnership in working together to make these things successful. Has really been shown in what we've done with James and E.H. Smith and our other community, and that understanding really makes these things a big success. Matthew, thank you very much for all of that great knowledge.
Thank you.
And information. The last couple of things from me, firstly saying in regards to mandates is let's all try and get ahead of it. We are here, we would love to hear from you. My team are ready to come in and not just talk about the mandate, we can really talk to you about creating value in Open ECX. What is it going to mean to you? What will it do to your business, and how, and you can understand why so many of our customers are adopting this software at the moment and are really thriving with it. So thank you so much for joining. We will welcome hearing from you, but you will also hear from us. So thank you very much for your time.
Take care.